Well, Michael Bociurkiw is a global affairs analyst who was previously a spokesman for the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, based in Ukraine. Joins me now from Vancouver Island. So what might Russia have to gain from activating or escalating hostilities in the region?
Right. Well, you know, it's very difficult to get into Mr. Putin's mind, but with this buildup of so many troops and so much military hardware, it's unprecedented. And I think there are several objectives here, possible objectives. One is to put more pressure on Ukraine to agree to the 2015 Minsk framework, which, by the way, is much more in Russia's favor because it does call for things like semi-autonomy of the Donbass, local elections, that sort of thing. And I think also it's a way to send a test to the Biden administration that this is the kind of post-COVID new world order that Russia sees, is that it can do whatever it wants when it chooses. And very similarly, I think acting very much like China right now, being the strong man and defining a kind of sphere of influence that it intends to pursue. And then one more thing, of course, Russia is always proclaiming that it has the right to defend Russian-speaking citizens or Russian citizens. In the past 2 years, it's given out 650,000 passports to people in the Donbass. So this is really a kind of passport protectorate of Russia that it intends to defend.
What can the Biden administration do?
Well, I will say this, is that words of concern just aren't enough. It didn't work in the current situation in Myanmar, and it's not working in the current situation in Russia. I think they have to go pretty much for the nuclear option, and that would be really implementing those really strict financial sanctions, including possibly temporarily at least removing Russia from the international banking system, the so-called SWIFT payment system, but also making it very difficult for the people immediately in Putin's circle, the oligarchs, to do things like property transactions in London. As you know, billions of dollars have been spent there by Russian oligarchs to send their kids to school, buy property. If that were to be cut off, I'm sure Mr. Putin would get several phone calls right away.
But it won't cause him to change his current position.
Well, I think the only thing that will cause him to some restraint is that if some kind of deal over Minsk is made, because remember, he's also constrained in the regards that they're having a big fight with COVID right now. The economy is not performing well, and taking over the Donbass, one of the most bombed out areas in the world, would be very, very costly to the Russian economy. And then finally, Maryam, is that this kind of foreign adventurism of the past, seizing Crimea, things like that, just does not give Putin the popularity boost that it once did at home. And don't forget, there are Duma elections coming up later this year.
What about NATO? Ukraine wants to try and initiate or activate membership proceedings. That's not likely to happen, is it?
With all due respect to President Zelensky and his foreign minister, who I know, I think this is a non-starter. I call it the nuclear option. If NATO were to expand its footprint, if you will, right to the border of Russia, Russia will take very, very strong action, including a military intervention. That isn't the way to go. I think as the steps I mentioned previously would be more like it. And one more thing, Maryam, if I can, the other objective, probably in Mr. Putin's mind, to kind of subtly get more control over these areas is to deploy Russian so-called peacekeepers that would look sort of benign, but would be another way of securing that area to be under Russia's control.
Thank you so much, Michael Bociurkiw, for joining us today on the NewsHour. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Still ahead for you on this NewsHour from London. Johnson & Johnson delays the rollout of its vaccine in Europe as the US investigates blood clots in 6 women. 2 Minnesota police officers resign over the shooting of 20-year-old Daunte Wright on Sunday as the defense begins its case in the trial of the death of George Floyd. And in sport, the Taiwanese baseball player who's been subjected to racist abuse after making a mistake during a game.
You see the big